Have you ever wondered what your customers truly want and need from you? In this episode, my guest, Suzanne Reilley, is going to share her surprising discovery that the key to success lies in truly understanding and listening to your audience. But how do you do that? And how can understanding what your customers really want transform your business and help you achieve greater success? So, Suzanne's going to dive into practical strategies for uncovering your ideal client's deepest desires, which is going to help you reduce the risk of missing the mark and ensure that your offerings resonate really, really powerfully with your audience. She'll also touch on the importance of balancing personal development with business growth and how to harness your unique strengths to build a thriving business. Suzanne Reilley is a seasoned business coach, marketing strategist, and copy advisor who has worked with hundreds of clients. Her expertise has been featured in prominent publications like The Washington Post and Daily Candy, and her unique approach and proven track record make her the perfect guide to help us navigate the complexities of understanding and serving our customers better. Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm Trudy Rankin, and I bring you stories, tips, and advice from online entrepreneurs who have worked their way through problems and challenges to get to success, however they define that success. Because if we've done it, so can you. I've been running my own online business for over 9 years now, and I've become passionate about helping business owners like you successfully tackle the bumps in the road that could stop you from achieving the success that matters to you. I've used my experience and what I've learned from others to help hundreds of people grow the online side of their business. And one of my greatest joys is working with people who, because of life circumstances, need a flexible work from home option that helps them pay the bills. My mission is simple. I want to help you solve the challenges you face as an online business owner so that you can have more time and money for yourself and your family and more choices in how you live your life. So if you're ready to dive into understanding your customers and tailoring your offerings to meet their needs, stick around and we'll get cracking. Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin. And today I actually have with me somebody who is a business coach, a marketing strategist, and a copy advisor for professional service businesses and online course creators who are passionate about helping others. And she's worked individually with hundreds of repeat clients. And her work has been featured in Voyage LA, Canvas, Rebel, Go Solo, The Washington Post, and Daily Candy. And I was intrigued when she reached out to me. I was intrigued by some of the things that she's got some expertise in. And I've asked her if she could just talk a little bit about something that I always found a conundrum when I first started out. And that's how to understand what your customer wants most. How do you actually get to the nub of it in terms of what that ideal client wants and needs from you? And how do we get over the concern that if you figure out what your customer really wants the most, you won't actually be able to give it to them. So I'm really excited to have Suzanne here today and just talk us through that whole messy business of trying to figure out how you can best serve your customers. And yeah, thanks for being here, Suzanne.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Trudy. And it's such an important topic because it's so natural for business owners at every level of business to think that they need to come up with this brilliant, creative idea in their own mind of what their offer is going to be or what their business is going to be or post on social. And it can actually be really freeing to think that there's a process that a lot of very skillful business owners are using. And it's really the act of listening to your audience and understanding them on a couple different key levels so that you can respond to what they want most. And the beauty in this is that it really reduces your risk of missing the mark by a lot. Because if you can see that a lot of people are asking for something, if they really want something, if they really are just pressed for clarity on some topic, you can have a greater amount of confidence that if you make that offer and share it properly, it's going to land. So it can really reduce your risk. And like introverts everywhere rejoice because we're great listeners and we're great at hearing and understanding people. When marketing, there can be a lot of extroverts and a lot of big personalities. So this can be a really cool thing for introverts because I definitely have a strong introverted side and we get to listen and understand people and then help them. And that's amazing. The first thing that is really important that you touched on is the first step in doing this is understanding who your ideal client is. One way you can go about this, I always recommend that people go a little bit deeper than demographics because it can be a factor to know, say, what someone's income is, if they can afford your services, or say if they're married or single or that kind of thing. At the end of the day, there are people who have a ton of money who will never invest in you. And there are people who don't have a lot of money who will spend their last dollar to get the help. Really, what can be more impactful is to really think about what are this person's hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations that you want to help them with, the fears you want to help them resolve, and the desires that you want to help them heighten through your products and services. So one way that I love to go about this ideal client stuff is by thinking back to, so if you have an established business, and you can do this if you're new as well, but if you have an established business, think about the people who you just adore working with. And just then, once you have those people in mind, think about what qualities they have. And this is going to be different for everybody. So some business owners are going to love working with people who are driven and decisive and aggressive, and other people might prefer ideal clients who are a bit more introspective and softer, or it can really be anything, but it's people who you really have synergy with because you're going to spend all day, every day, either making things for these folks, researching their needs, creating social for these folks, answering these folks' questions. So you want it to be people who you enjoy being around. At least I believe I like the process and I like to enjoy my work. So I believe that just makes things that much more sustainable. And even if you don't have an established business or previous clients quite yet, you can think about the type of person who inspired you to want to start a business or people you enjoy in helping in general. So the other thing you want to look at in an ideal client is you want it to be someone who is really looking for what you have to offer. It's someone who, when they find you, they're going to be thrilled to have found you, and you are going to be thrilled to be working with them. And it's this seamless matchup where they're so happy to find what you have. They have time, money, resources to invest in what you're offering. They use the product or service. They get great results. And then when that happens, they're just so naturally happy to tell others about you. So when you have that in place, it's much less likely that your ideal client will have these burning desires that you can't help them with because you've already matched up that synergy pretty well.
I think it's interesting because for people who've been longtime listeners of this podcast, they'll know that ran a program for the Australian federal government where we were working with carers and caregivers and people over the age of 50 to try and help them start their own online business. And one of the biggest obstacles for someone successfully starting a business, there was a bunch of obstacles, but one of the biggest was that people would come up with an idea for a business and they would decide, I want to do this. I have confidence enough that I can do this thing, and this is how I can help people. And that's the only thing that I can offer. I don't have enough confidence. Imposter syndrome is very real. I don't have enough confidence to offer this other thing to people. So I'm a little afraid to go and do this research and to try and figure out what that synergy is. So to me, finding the synergy is like the magic key, because once you've discovered that synergy, then you've got people who need you, they're willing to pay for you, and you've got something you can offer them that helps. However, getting to that point can be really difficult because sometimes what you have to offer and the way you think about what you have to offer is what people need, but the language that you use to describe is not the same as what people use to think about the problem and challenge that they have. So talk just a little bit about that as a barrier to overcome when you're trying to figure out and achieve that synergy between what people need and what you can offer.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much good stuff there to talk about. So I think one element of this that is not talked about very often, but is so important is you come up with this idea and this is the idea you feel passionate about and you want to put this out there, but then you think, oh gosh, like nobody's going to want that or it's not going to be right. And this really brings up the concept of how I believe personal development alongside building a business is so important. And there's so many different modalities to consider, whether it's therapy or energy healing or coaching or just any kind of personal development to tend to the fears that come up or the limitations we believe we have because they are everywhere. Online business brings up fears of rejection, fears of being seen, everybody's money stuff. It brings up this thing of, I'm really passionate. What if nobody wants it? And so I have found it really important. And this isn't just for new folks. I have worked with people who are a decade in business who are really grounded and really used to the business landscape. But once it's time to change the homepage, it's like, ooh, the emotions really start to run high and it's understandable. So I think it's really important to understand, at least from my perspective, that if you're going about something, you get stuck on yourself, you are not alone. It's something that's not maybe talked about at the forefront, but it's really common. And I think it's important to not only learn about strategy, but to evolve as a person yourself. And life is complex. It can be a lot, but it's really worth it. So that's one factor. And then let's see, what else? What other topics were in there? There was so much good juice in what you said.
I have to say what you said about that whole giving yourself permission to evolve is so important in terms of getting to the place where you've got the synergy that we were talking about. Because we start out not believing in ourselves necessarily. We have to learn the skills that are needed to run a business, even if it involves changing something on your website. You've got to learn those things and know them until you get to the point where maybe you can have somebody else do them. But if you don't understand them to start with, you're not going to know if it's being done well. So you have to evolve.
Yes.
But I have to say that even for myself, the biggest challenge for me was to change my mindset from a corporate employee mindset to a small business owner, boss of myself mindset. That is a huge change to make. And I do believe, and it's anecdotal, of course, but I do believe, based on what I've seen and read, that a lot of businesses end up floundering and failing because people don't manage to make that transition successfully. It's not their business that failed. They've failed to actually change their mindset enough to actually become a successful boss. So anyway, that's just a personal opinion. I'd be fascinated to hear what other people have to say, what other listeners have to say, but I agree with you that evolution is really critical. So based on your experience, what would be some of the things that would help a person evolve so that they then become a kind of person who can do the research and find out is that people really want and need from them?
That's a great question. I think I also want to agree with you on what you said previously I think anyone transitioning from corporate to entrepreneurship, they are two absolutely completely different mindsets. I actually had someone come to me as a client and she said, I tried working with someone who was more corporate inclined. And she was like, it just absolutely didn't match up. They're two just totally different worlds. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. Like you said, if someone is making that transition, that it is a transition. And so I think to your question about what are some things that people can keep in mind to change their mindsets? First of all, I do believe it's doing some inner work to be able to heal things, any kind of triggers, which we all have. And so when we come across them, we have someone to talk about them with. And just those things of just fears, insecurities, imposter syndrome, things like that. It's really helpful to have a skilled practitioner to help with that. And I don't go deeply into that with clients. I'm very aware of different modalities and I can share the ins and outs of that, but having that person to really help through that. But then as far as the strategy side of things, I think what happens a lot, and it really breaks my heart a little, is I come across these people who are so brilliant and they have such amazing things to offer the world and they're dedicated and they're driven and they're ready to learn. And I'm just like, man, this person's just I can't wait to see what this person does. And then they'll work with me for a little bit. They'll say, yeah, I tried one or two things that didn't work out, so I folded the business. And I'm like, wait, no, it's like, business is fantastic and you are fantastic. You just need to connect some of the dots a little bit better and keep learning and keep testing and keep iterating. That's a natural part of the process. It does not mean that you or the business have failed. It just, I think, if we're looking at the headlines on social media, it's easy to think that if we didn't nail the 5K webinar this afternoon, or we didn't make $100,000 in 30 days, that it's over. Headlines are like that because we put our best foot forward. It's like anything on social media. I think a lot of it is true. I think it's valid. I think it's relevant. And I think we should put our best foot forward, but we have to keep in mind that's not always the entire story. There's often a lot of strife that came before the metrics. At least it's true for me. It's a lot of what on earth am I doing? So I think just having that mindset and that expectation is really important for people. And certainly if people come with past business experience, if they're ready to get in front of people, if they're ready to learn fast, if they have a lot of skills in the digital marketing space, they're gonna excel. They can excel really fast. But if people have a lot to learn, it's going to take longer. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just worth keeping in mind. So I think as far as the strategy skills for people to keep in mind about learning is, number one, really just having that mindset of it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I get just as caught up in this as everyone else. I like instant gratification. I like things to work amazingly the first time. And so I have to bring myself back to this constantly. But it is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And then there's also the factor of, we touched on this before, of people say, I have this idea. It's going to work for everyone. It's going to help everyone's life. And they go full force on this idea. And that's in part really wonderful, but it's important to, consider the other side of the conversation, which is your audience, your customers, the people who are going to be buying from you, working with you, interacting with you. This is a two-way conversation. And without understanding your customers, business owners end up saying, well, this is what people need, but people don't buy what they need. People buy what they want. And so it's important to understand what that is. And I firmly believe that being a human is so complex and there are just so many problems that we have in our lives that there is just an infinite amount of things that there are to help people with. So I think if one understand skillful ways to listen to your customer or potential customers, you're going to find something that you love helping people with. There's just so much opportunity out there.
Well, let's talk about that just for a minute. I think in terms of, to wrap up what we were just talking about, I think one of the key points is to give yourself permission to take the time to do the learning, to change your mindset, to develop yourself from whatever you were doing into a business owner, an effective business owner. And as part of that process while you're doing that, you do need to be doing that two-way communication thing, which is not just selling. It's like being in the market yelling, hey, I got fish for sale, I got fish for sale, or whatever, but actually listening to what people have to say and go, if they say, well, I don't want fish, I want something else. So let's just talk about that for a little while in terms of the different ways that we can listen to people. And I'm going to come back before we jump into it. There's a couple of things. One is, you said at the very beginning, you mentioned the concept of a big personality, introvert, extrovert. And I had to smile because you can have big personality introverts as well. And so it's interesting distinction because you might get your energy from being by yourself. But you might be a big personality who, when you're out there, you enjoy being out there, but you need time to yourself. Or you might be just the opposite. You get your energy from being with people, and you might not be a big personality. You might be somebody who just likes being with people and listening. So that's something to think about.
Yeah.
Having said that, coming back to what are ways we can listen to what our ideal clients really want? I'm personally deeply into quizzes. I think quizzes, especially lead magnet quizzes, are an incredibly good way of being able to understand and get people to tell us what they need. And they're also a really good way of gathering data. Now, having said that, there are other ways of doing it as well. Do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the ways that you use to help listen to customers?
Absolutely. I love the idea of quizzes, and maybe I could dig into your content a bit more to learn more myself, because I haven't used them a ton. Again, for no good reason. There are just so many tools out there, and it's something I haven't dove into deeply. That's a pretty cool idea. I'll first mention a couple ways that I don't particularly love. It can be very freeing in saying these as well, because these can be time intensive, labor intensive, sometimes costly. And I don't know, it just lets people off the hook of not having to do that stuff if they don't want to. First of all, surveys. I'm very specific with how I use surveys and if and where and how they're worded, because we are just so over surveyed these days. It's like I do a Google search and Google is, what did you think of what we brought you? And I'm like, I don't know, whatever. And it's like everywhere we turn, there's a survey. I think we are a little oversaturated with that. And so I use them very sparingly, if at all. The other thing people think of is focus groups. That's something that typically, I believe, exists in the corporate world, is probably requires a decent amount of cost, certainly time. And the thing with focus groups is that I'm sure they have value, but again, like, they're expensive, and then people can get caught into groupthink, and you have to really conduct them well. Same with customer interviews. They certainly have a place, and the benefit with those is that you can really hear the things that are deeply emotional for people, or things that really are affecting them in a big way, but they take time, and you have to do them in a certain way so that if you don't conduct them properly, you can have someone willing to share insights with you, and then you get in the conversation, and they have to be willing to share deeply of themselves, and not, sometimes you'll ask them a question like, what was happening in your life that brought you here today, or brought you to consider my services? And they'll say, well, I think what happens a lot in the marketplace is that people just, whenever they speculate about what they think other people are thinking, which is not, you can't really use that interview. So like those things, they can be labor intensive and time intensive. They have a place, but I don't use them very often. And what I do typically is skillful listening across the internet. And so this takes three main forms for me. Number one is Amazon reviews. And for anyone who isn't familiar with that, okay, so you know this, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Basically, any topic you're interested in offering to people, you can pull up. It's typically a book on Amazon on that topic. And you never swipe the book's description. You never swipe anything from the book. But what you're looking for, you want to check out the comment section and what people are saying about that book. And you're looking for people's hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations, what they liked, what they didn't like, why they bought the book, what challenge were they trying to solve in buying the book. And you can literally create things from that. So say, for example, I have been seeing in a couple different places where people are commenting, I'm so tired of people talking about business fluff and not telling me like how to do it, not giving me, I'm here today at my desk. What do I do? How do I do it? So having that understanding, having heard at least a number of people say that, I can be more aware to get into the tangible action steps, maybe more than I would have before having that awareness. So that is how so you read through everything, you get the overall vibe, just an understanding of the overall landscape of what's happening. And then you can pull out specific phrases. And it's beautiful because those phrases, you use them responsibly with respect, but they can become your whole brand. They become your email topics. They become your funnel strategy. They become your offers. They become everything. You just make everything from that. And of course, you choose the challenges you want to solve in an on-brand way. Like sometimes people ask a question, either it's A, outside my wheelhouse, or B, just not really something I solve in my brand. So I let those pass by. You choose the ones that you love responding to. And with that, there are two other places where I do the same kind of listening, and that's in the comment section of competitor social posts. Again, I am never swiping their content. I am never aiming to be them. I am not copying anything about their uniqueness. I'm looking in the comment section to see what types of things are helpful to people, what types of things they're like a little lost on, what types of things they wish that person would have talked about. And if you have an established social media presence, some people don't, either way is totally fine, but you can also listen in your own social comments if or when you have that. And the third place that I do this is with past client communication. If you have past client communication, you can look through people reaching out to you, what they were wanting, even as you go through the challenges they have, and that can inform all of your offers, everything you do. But even if you don't have that, you can craft an entire brand from Amazon review mining and going through the comment section of competitors' social posts, especially the stickiest ones with the most comments.
I think those are both really good things to be doing, especially the Amazon reviews one. People reveal a lot more than you would think in their comments when they're doing a review.
They do.
And I always like to tell people, look for the emotion words. You're talking about hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations. And that's a really good way of doing it. And just remembering that those things are expressed using emotion-based words. And it's a fantastic tool. I'm curious though, because you said for the third one that you talked about, looking at customer feedback or customer communication, if you were just getting started out or was just getting started out and they don't yet have, they might have some communication, but it's not enough to really help fill in the gaps. Is there another way that you could use to help them guesstimate what people are struggling with, challenged by? As you said, hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations.
If people don't have that yet, and even so, I have client input, but I still use Amazon reviews. I think the vastness of information available in Amazon reviews is pretty inexhaustible. If they don't have client feedback yet or client communication, I would just pull up more books on more surrounding topics, and really anywhere that people are. And of course, with Amazon reviews, you have to look for the ones that seem genuine. I'm with you on, yes, go for the emotionally based stuff. Go for the elements of story where people are being descriptive in describing what they could smell or taste or feel or what their experience was like. Look for those little nuggets. I would just pull up more resources, more books, more competitor posts. It's really inexhaustible. Once you learn how to do this, it's a matter of, oh my gosh, it becomes overwhelming, the amount of voice of customer research that you can go through. And you have to be like, whoa, I have enough. I have to stop or I'm not going to be able to, I don't even know where to put this stuff. So yeah, I would pull up more books and have it be the ones with a lot of reviews. Some books have 300 or 500 or 1,000 reviews. And it does take time. It's a little tedious, but there's so much. So I would say just more Amazon books and more competitor comment sections. It is important to use that, I feel, even when people have clients, because just to keep in mind the landscape that's happening outside of your business anyway. So if people don't have clients yet, they're really not losing out on anything in that regard.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So I'm going to ask you just a curiosity-based question, because as I said, it is a brilliant tool. It's a really good way of doing your voice of customer research. And I always used to tell people, if you don't spend any more than 4 hours doing it, because you can go down a rabbit hole and spend tons of time. What's your thought? You've got enough signal.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great question. I think it's when I start to see, now this is a little nebulous, so I'll try to make it tangible if we can, but it's when I start to see the trends coming through, when I'm getting a real solid grasp of the vibe, the texture, the fabric of the conversation. And when I have enough. Okay, so I'm a real big fan of conversion focused copy, which is another piece that you brought up earlier of how do I communicate this in a way that my audience will understand. And so voice of customer research and conversion copy go together. I want to touch on this just briefly. It connects to your question. People get a little off track because it's really natural to think, I know how to write, because most of us have been writing since elementary school. So they think, I know how to write emails. I know how to write a website. I know how to write. However, conversion copywriting is a completely different skill set. Just because we learned how to write in elementary school doesn't mean we know how to write legal contracts. And it's the same thing of we don't know how to write compelling messaging that is going to be engaging, that's going to help people connect with our brand and offer them to take the next step with us if they would like. So I really recommend that people learn that skill set. I think it's really worth gaining a proficiency in that, because I learned a lot through Jeff Walker's Product Launch Formula, through Joanna Wee and Copy Hackers. And I haven't done it myself, but I believe StoryBrand is also really solid. When people come to me having done StoryBrand, there's a lot of synergy. We can just roll. It's a very high value skill set, and you need it everywhere in your business. Emails, landing pages, thank you pages, everywhere across your funnel. And it's just too expensive to hire somebody to do every single thing across your whole funnel. Like, you cannot hire out for every single blog post, every single everything. So I think it's worth learning how to do yourself. And then if you want down the line to hire to do pieces, that's fine. Like, sometimes people are pretty good at it, and then they'll be like, I really want to nail this. Can you help me nail this one thing? And yeah, just keep that in mind. And so basically this comes back to the question of, with voice of customer research, conversion copywriting is much more architecture. Like, you're much more, Eugene Schwartz said this, copy is assembled, not written. So basically it's not this creative process. It's this thing of where there's frameworks and formulas, and you basically just pull the VOC, you pull the voice of customer research from there and plug it into the framework. Of course, you have to make it flow and sound right. But so basically, I know that I have enough voice of customer research when I have enough of that to fill into copy frameworks. And if I'm sitting there struggling and thinking of what should I be saying here, I'm like, oh, first question is, shoot, you're not in the VOC document. I live in the VOC document when I'm writing anything. So it's, oh, shoot, I briefly got disconnected from that focus. And then the second thing is, do I have a gap somewhere in what I understand about my customer? So then I have to go in and fill in more. So it's basically enough till I see the trends, enough until I can write strong copy with it. And for me, what that looks like is that typically ends up being about 5 to 10 pages in a Google Doc, maybe a little bit more. If it gets to be more, I get a little overloaded. And then there was one other thing I was going to say. I lost my train of thought there, but
I think that covers it fairly well. It makes sense to me that your answer makes sense to me. Do your research until you feel like you know enough that you could go away and write a landing page, or you could write an email, or you could a sequence, or you could write the copy on a website. Now, obviously not everybody's that comfortable being a conversion copywriter. That is a skill. It really is a very important skill. Even though everybody needs to know how to do it, not everybody's going to be that good at it. Eventually,
right.
You've got to know enough about how to do it so that you can build a business enough so that you can pay somebody else to do it, basically.
Yes. And I remembered what I was going to say also, that when I'm just with an audience, it usually ends up being 5 to 10 pages. I get the overall fabric. I'm able to see the trends. I have the building blocks to write a conversion focused email. And then as the listening process continues over time, So I am always listening to what people say, listening to their tone. I'm listening to their frustrations. I'm listening to what they say. So like that evolution, it's like any relationship. I can know them pretty well at the outset, but then I'm getting to know different nuances of my ideal audience over time, who I enjoy working with, what they need. I believe it's Joanna Weave who says, know your ideal client as well as your spouse. And then she's like, no, better actually. You should know that. And it's true. It's just the better we know someone, the better. It's like gift giving. Like the better we know someone, the better gifts we can give them. And it's extremely similar with online business. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Now, I'm just aware that we could talk about this for a very long time, but we're actually running out of time. Could you, in just 2 minutes, just tell people a little bit about your journey and how you actually got started doing what you do?
Absolutely. I'll try as concise as possible. So I actually started out as a personal trainer. I have a degree in exercise science, and I never took any business marketing, any kind of classes like in college. But then when I got out into my first job, I realized there was no way for me to work with people unless I signed them on myself. And so it was basically like, oh, here's your t-shirt and here's your floor hours and here's your stack of agreement forms. Let us know if you need anything. And so I really had to learn on the fly. And thankfully, the fitness director that I worked with was really wonderful. I was able to work it out. And I met just a lot of great people and great clients who I adored working with. And yeah, I was able to make it happen. My interest in learning about business and marketing transitioned into when I was in DC, and a lot of people transitioned to training people in their homes. You can keep a larger percentage of the training fee. And because in a gym, you give them a cut, certainly for the facility. So then I had to learn about that. And then I started to learn about online business. And then I took Jeff Walker's product launch formula. Then I rewrote a launch for one of my mastermind partners. And it was a great first go. Not $1 million launch, but I was very happy for my first one. And so then it just evolved from there. And I will say my inner and outer learning process was like really uphill and not always easy. And so I'm just really passionate about if there's any ways that I can help people. I appreciate the wisdom I gained from my journey and I continue to gain, but if there are other people who I can make their path easier, that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of us entrepreneurs feel like that. We're always learning. It's good to be able to help people who are, have maybe just a little bit behind in terms of trying to achieve the same things. So if people are interested in reaching out to you or learning more about you and what you do, where would they go?
Sure. So my website is SuzanneReilley.com. And at the website, I have a freebie. It's called Content Calendar Mastery. Map out a year's worth of engaging topics in 90 minutes or less. And it's very much connected to what we talked about today in terms of instead of looking for people's hopes, dreams, fears, and aspirations, you look for people's questions and you can answer those in social posts and emails and topics. And when you go that research focused way, it's actually quite easy to pull that stuff up and not have to come up with it all on your own. So yeah, that's at the website available there.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I put those in the show notes. Suzanne Reilley, and it's Reilley.com.
Correct. Yes.
So that people know. And Suzanne, it's been really great talking with you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Suzanne Reilley insightful and valuable and helpful. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast. Your honest feedback helps others decide if this podcast can help them too. And remember to share this episode with anyone who might benefit from it. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.